So that brings us nicely on to the first of our theme segments, which is about the future of digital manufacturing ecosystems. And just picking up on the question about skills and some of the skills we may need, I don't think digital skills are necessarily always programming. And I think what we're about to see in the next presentation, which is from Kim Lloyd, who is the EMEA Director for SupplyVue, I think in what she's going to share with you in SupplyVue, you'll see that perhaps there's a need for a set of digital skills, but perhaps not in the way that you'd necessarily have envisaged. So,
have I got the clicker, Jan?
Yes, you need that.
I do.
It seems to work well if you sort of say
stand in front. I've been told to stand in front of the screen as well, so you get the backdrop. Have we got the backdrop as well? Oh, I can see Mr. Burdett. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I am going to spend 10 minutes on a subject that, frankly, Gartner spent about 3 years about talking last week. So Jan's given me a very difficult task to try and get into the whole issue around how do we drive stability in a very unstable environment. As Chris nicely pointed out, actually the advantage of the last couple of years with COVID and with Ukraine and with Russia is people's eyes have been open to how unstable is the environment and can my supply chain absorb that shock? And guess what? We found out it can't. So what I'm going to try and do is give you a very quick slide, just a vision of, well, what if? Could we have a world where actually we are not running around like lunatics, trying to jump on a supply chain issue every time it happens? Can we not have 10,000 people working in my supply chain trying to manage this unstable environment? I'm going to talk about, well, what is the challenge around that, and how can we then enable to move forward to deliver that end vision? And what can we do now? Because frankly, this isn't tomorrow's problem, this is now. What can we do now to really start working on that issue? So I'm not going to take any claim for actually part of this picture, because actually it was a picture that a good friend of mine, Alessandro De Luca from Merck, introduced a couple of years ago at Gartner again. I'm not trying to do a bit of a sales pitch for Gartner, sorry.
It's to InterAct, not Gartner.
I know, sorry, Jan. Anyway, so can you imagine an environment where you haven't got an organisation of 100 plus people trying to manage your supply chain? Can you imagine that environment where actually you've got one planner sitting there coordinating your whole network and it runs smoothly? And everybody was probably sitting there thinking, well, what's the dog doing in the picture? Well, apparently the dog is there every time the planner tries to intervene into his planning system, he'll bite his fingers off. So he'll stop the planner from intervening into his end-to-end supply chain and just let the processes run. Can you imagine a world where we actually have people not interfering with their end-to-end supply chain, and all our resources are perfectly used to meet our consumer demands all of the time? So what that means is we're not air freighting products around the world because somebody's just ordered something that we can't supply, but we are absolutely just letting our systems run and not intervening. So can anybody imagine that end state world? Is that a far distant vision of what might the world? I'm getting a few shakes of head. I believe it's definitely possible, but there's some key things, some key challenges that we need to front up to and start working on now. If we don't start working on them now, we're still going to have, as I had, I've worked for Procter & Gamble, I've worked for Philips as their planning director, etc. I had hundreds of people just sitting there trying to coordinate my supply chain, and frankly, they were the ones creating the chaos and the noise. So I absolutely would challenge you, we can start taking people out of the organisation and driving stability into our networks, because actually we're doing a lot of self-inflicted harm ourselves. So what does that actually look like? Well, the challenge is, absolutely, in my eyes, we are working in a world where we're blinkered, we're working in silos, and those silos are both information silos and they're organisation silos, okay? Information silos, if you know your supply chains well, as I bet everybody here does, we've typically got demand planning systems, we've got warehouse management systems, we've got MES systems, etc. And that's just within your own supply chain. If you start looking outside that, you've got your suppliers' information systems, you've got your customers' information systems. guess what? They're generally interfaced by Excel spreadsheets. People who are sitting there not believing what's coming up or down the supply chain and overwriting that information. And generally, they're making that information signal worse. Okay, so that's your first issue, information silos. Information flow, and that word flow is so important in supply chains, is very poor in most supply chains. The second issue is then organisational and what we call managerial silos. So typically, a supply chain, and you're probably manufacturers here, maybe, so you're focused on your manufacturing results, your factory results, which are probably cost optimization. And actually, what we need to be looking at is across that end-to-end supply chain, because if you're focused on your individual siloed results, you're about optimizing that individual silo, which is probably causing a resource inefficiency further up or down the supply chain. And what we need to start looking at is the result of the end-to-end supply chain, because typically if you're looking just at that silo, what you're doing is protecting your own little empire on your own silo. So you're creating what we call buffers in between all of those nodes, which are basically resource inefficiency. They're typically things like high inventory, they're probably things like more capacity on your production lines because you want to protect yourself against a shock, a grenade that might be thrown in, and you want to protect your silo. It could be things like, and those resource inefficiencies could be carbon footprint, because you are then air freighting product around the world. So I'm not just talking about cost optimization, I'm talking about optimizing the resources within your end-to-end network. And more people are now starting to think about, well, am I setting my supply chain up which is carbon efficient, not just cost efficient? I'm rattling through this because I'm conscious of time. It's such a big subject, so I really apologise. There may be a few questions at the end. The good thing is there is an answer, okay? There is an answer, but it requires us to move out of these siloed focused and information silos, etc. And it's all about flow. It's all about making sure you've got good flow of information down your supply chains and across those organisations, well, inside your organisation and also outside your organisation boundaries. So you're then about creating good flow from your custom and the demand pattern all the way through your transport systems, all the way through into your supply base, and take out what we call that bullwhip, that noise, that extra noise that by the time that information signal gets to your supplier, that signal is so erratic that your poor supplier is busy just trying to work out what on earth I'm supposed to be supplying in, and just driving stability of flow. And then consequently, looking at good flow of product, because typically a supply chain is all about different cycle speeds. And typically you have your factory wanting to have long production runs, having a nice cadence, but actually it's completely uncoordinated with your warehouse systems, your products coming in. And so guess what? Your factory is busy trying to run at a rate that isn't well coordinated. So again, you've got to look at good product flow. It's all about synchronizing and driving stability and protecting that stability in your network. So what does that mean? I'm rattling through, sorry Dan, I'll keep going. The good thing is technology does exist now, okay? Technology is part of the change. Clearly, in every organisation, you have to look at the other cultural areas around, have I given my people the right skill to perform the tasks? Have I defined what those tasks are? Have I got the right reward and recognition? I haven't just got my factory just focused on my factory results. They're looking at the end-to-end supply chain. But my key message, because it's about technology, is that the information systems do exist now. And part of the barriers that exist is that people don't know and understand that technology. They also believe that big tech requires big effort to change. And actually, that's the story that I want to give you now, that is not what is the reality currently. Tech project doesn't have to be a 3-year project. It doesn't have to take in all of your resources to do the change. And it certainly doesn't have to be multi-million-pound execution projects. So my challenge is to you is to think about, first of all, this siloed approach Are you truly looking at end-to-end to coordinate your resources? And when I mean resources, I'm talking about cost to serve, but also carbon footprint. And are you then minimizing the buffers within your network? And are you then using the tech that's available, the cloud-based solutions, the small tech, the agile tech that can quickly give you insight to then better coordinate that network? And of course, I'll finish on a sales pitch. Which is a wrongly coloured slide. Sorry, that hasn't come out. Which certainly, I work for a company that does allow you to do that. So if you do have any questions on specific tech, or part of my role at P&G was around organisational change, so combining the two and really then enabling you to drive change is clearly the key message. Thank you, Jen. Was that my 10 minutes?
Okay.